All right, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Illumine our hearts, O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, of the pure light of thy divine knowledge. And plant in us also the fear of thy blessed commandments, trampling down all carnal desires, who may enter a spiritual manner of living, both thinking and doing such things as well pleasing unto thee. For thou art the illumination of our souls and bodies, O Christ our God, and unto thee we ascribe glory together with thine and originate Father, and thine all holy, good, life-giving Spirit, now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Father.
Hi, Courgette. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank God. All right. So here we are, the last Bible study before Lent. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah,
Okay. Jonna has a question. Speak loudly, please.
I was reading my original Bible and in there it had, when they were dividing the spoils from the divisions,
Okay.
that there was one particular rock that was set in a place. And he named the rock Ed, E-D,
Okay.
and said, this is a holy place.
Okay.
Okay, can you tell me anything about that?
No. Do you see it in that Bible?
I'm looking in the Orthodox Bible, I can't find it.
Okay.
What book?
Do you remember where it was? It was in Joshua?
I believe it was in chapter 8.
Gary, you want to go get yourself a Bible?
Here, right here.
Oh, here. One for each hand.
My Bible is in the Old English. So
King James, you mean?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
See a lot of AI.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I. Nope, that's not it. I'm in the wrong place. Sorry.
Verse 30 talks about Joshua building an altar
Yeah,
in Mount Ebal.
and this is where this was described in the King James Old English thing. So the spelling might have been, you know,
And it doesn't say the rock's name.
but the rock had a lot to do with the altar.
No rock. It says an altar of unhewn stones.
Yeah. And they
It's
piled them over the king's body. Never mind.
Just give me a second. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so while we look at that, does anyone else have any questions about anything?
Yes. Why did you read from Joel today? I mean, why do we not have a gospel and an epistle?
Wait till Friday. Okay,
Why? What are you gonna do on Friday?
Same thing. I'm going to read 2 Old Testament readings instead of an epistle and a gospel. It's a great question. And the reason why is because we are in that season where we are about to lose all weekday liturgies. Okay, so during the course of the fast, we don't have any weekday liturgies except for if we have a major holiday like Annunciation. Now we're going to combine Annunciation and the Sunday of Orthodoxy. So we're not going to have a feast on Monday, the 25th, we're going to predate it to the 24th. But anytime there's that kind of feast, you can have a liturgy during the week. Otherwise, you don't. And interestingly enough, when we do an epistle and a gospel, that tells you, among other things, that you are allowed to have a liturgy on that day, because those readings are meant to be read in the Divine Liturgy. Okay? I mean, if you notice, when I do my Saturday and Sunday readings, especially my Sunday readings, they're the exact same readings that we do on Sunday for the most part. Okay? And that's because it's liturgically connected, which is a beautiful segue into saying that the Bible is our liturgical book. Okay, it's a great book for us to read, but it is centered in the Divine Liturgy, especially the gospel. Okay, so everything that has to do with the gospel is tied to the Divine Liturgy. Now, we do read the gospel in other occasions. We read it at Orthros, and we can read it all sorts of different ways. We have 11 different resurrection gospels that we read in Orthros. And there are other times that we could read it too, but for the most part, that's when it's done in a Divine Liturgy. So if we don't have an epistle and a gospel that day, that means we cannot serve a Divine Liturgy that day. So no Divine Liturgy today, no Divine Liturgy on Friday. And next Monday through next Friday, no Divine Liturgy with the exception of one thing, and that's a pre-sanctified Divine Liturgy. We can have those because we've
You could have one on
consecrated.
Monday then,
Yeah,
during the day,
we can.
like at 9 AM.
What
We could.
time is the liturgy going to be?
What liturgy?
The next weekday liturgy?
The pre-sanctified Divine Liturgy, 6 o'clock. Next Wednesday.
Every night, 6 PM.
And next week, every night at 6 p.m. we have a service. Yep. Yeah, probably tomorrow, actually. I just keep forgetting. That's kind of common these days. A lot going on right now. Yeah, so that's the answer to your question, Courgette, is that we are not allowed to serve a Divine Liturgy today. We're not allowed to serve a Divine Liturgy on Friday. And so as a result, there are only Old Testament readings that are being done. No epistle, no gospel. So now the other question is, why Wednesday and Friday? Courgette probably knows
Well,
that. Probably knows it.
probably, well, yeah, I know why Wednesday and Friday. So the Divine Liturgy, when celebrated, is too festive for Wednesday and Fridays during Lent? Is that the mentality? Because I know the Divine Liturgy is a celebration and the gifts
No.
are consecrated.
No,
So is that why?
no. So let me answer a couple of things. The first thing is, we don't have a Divine Liturgy today because of the betrayal of Christ. We don't have a Divine Liturgy on Friday because of the crucifixion of Christ, which is exactly how we do it during the course of the week when we aren't in, we still have readings from the gospel and epistle during the course of the regular year on Wednesdays and Fridays, but we don't eat meat or dairy or things like that as a reminder of the betrayal on Wednesday, the crucifixion on Friday. Today, it takes one step further in that you do not have a Divine Liturgy today or on Friday. Okay. So it's because of those two acts. Now, the entire tone of the Lenten fast from Monday through Friday is that we are not in a state of mind. We are in a state of repentance and in a state of penance during the beginning during the course of the fast during the weekdays. Okay, so there are no Divine Liturgies during any of those days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Okay, the only days we can do it are Saturday and Sunday. All right, Saturday, because Christ, in a sense, if you think about it, held a Divine Liturgy in Hades. That's the Great and Holy Saturday that we do. Okay, that's Christ celebrating the Divine Liturgy in Hades, right before Pascha. But we can do that every Saturday during the course of the fast, all right, as an echo, a pre-echo, if you will, of that time of Christ in Hades, because at this point he is resurrected from the dead, because death cannot contain him. Okay, so that's a little bit of a misconception on our part. Bodily, he remains in the grave, but he is never fully dead. It's an
Yeah.
impossibility. You can't kill God. Okay, so there is a divine liturgy happening in Hades on Holy Saturday, and that is brought through the entire Lenten season. So you can have a divine liturgy on Saturday, and of course you can have a divine liturgy on Sunday. Why? Because every Sunday,
The day of the
some exceptions,
resurrection.
but every Sunday is a remembrance of the resurrection. Okay, so Saturday and Sunday it's appropriate to have, but Monday through Friday during the course of the fast, it is not. Okay.
Okay,
So, Jonna, I cannot find what
okay.
we're looking for. If you would do me a favor and just find it and then send it to me, and I'll forward it out. Okay, when you get a chance.
I'll probably just have to show it to you because I'm not
That's
sure.
perfect. That's fine. That's fine. You can just show it to me. Okay. Good question, Courgette. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one other one, just popped into my head. This only happens during the Great Fast. Now,
Right.
when we fast for Advent or for on Wednesday and Friday, you can read the Gospel and the Epistle.
Right.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Father.
You're welcome. Okay, so Albert just said that he has a problem with the genealogy of St. Luke. Okay,
Compared with Matthew.
compare with Matthew. Why?
Well. You compare the names, most of them ain't even close.
Right.
That's one.
Okay.
And then the obvious. Goes back to Adam.
He goes back to Adam.
And
What? Really?
That I can't, I just can't. wrap it
Okay.
around my head. But it ain't even close.
Right.
If you go from like Abraham to David,
Mm-hmm.
now he goes backwards.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He goes from Jesus to Adam.
Back to
where
Adam. Right.
Matthew goes Abraham to Jesus.
Right.
But there's sections in there, like from Abraham to David.
Mhm.
Both are pretty close,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Other than that, I mean, they ain't even got Joseph's dad wrong or different.
Right.
It ain't even close.
Right.
So I could see some of the names are spelled a little different. That's okay with me. But when they're not even in the same universe.
Yep.
That bothered, and it always did. I just said, that's the language.
Well, I don't know if there's anything that I'm going to say that's going to make you feel any better. Okay. But I am going to say a few things. The first thing is, do you think there were 14 generations from Abraham to David, and from
No,
David to the
that's-
deportation, from the deportation to Jesus?
No,
There were not.
no.
Okay. So Matthew's
In
already
that
is
sense, yeah,
suspicious. Okay.
right.
There's a major point that's being made here, and that is this idea of completion.
Completion.
Okay. 7 is the number of completion. You have 7 days in a week, 6 days of creation, 1 day of rest, but there are 7 days. And then there are the 7 churches in the book of Revelation. You have 7, just how many times you forgave, 7 times. Lamech will be avenged 7 times, but Christ says you are to forgive 70 times 7, right? So there are all these numbers that come into play. So that goes out beyond the gospel, to be honest with you. This is something that existed in Jewish society at the time. And I don't mean necessarily biblical society. I mean just like the common hoi polloi, the normal people. Okay, the kini is what we would call them. They're just common people. They're not educated, but they've got all sorts of interesting theories. Like right now, in this world, we have like some people who say that there's a theory that the world is flat, and others say it's not flat. And some people say we landed on the moon. Some people say we didn't land on the moon. Some people say this is going to bring the end of the world. There's one person who says as soon as the nation of Israel is established, Jesus is going to come back. And so they wrote a golden book of names. It's Jim Baker, I think. All these names are inscribed in a golden book. and they buried it a foot underneath the ground so that when Jesus lands, because he knows exactly where Jesus is going to land, his descent is going to cause the earth to part, and the book will appear, and Jesus will take the book and know that those people are the ones that are saved, and everyone else is going to be going somewhere else. Okay. Do we believe any of that? No. Okay, but those are things that exist right now in our culture, even though there's nothing to be taken from them. So at the same time, you have all these different things that circulate around the scriptures, okay, that people are talking about. And one of them has to do with numerology, these numbers and completion. Even, 40 days means a really long time. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean it's 40 literal days, but in Exodus, they wander for 40 years. In Deuteronomy, they wander for a generation. So which is it? Okay, so this is part of the problem. Matthew and Luke didn't compare notes with each other. I'm not even sure they knew each other. Okay. I mean, to the extent where they compared notes on their gospels. Okay, I don't think they had each other to compare off of, to be honest with you. So that's why you have one genealogy one way and another genealogy of another way. Okay, now it's also interesting to me that those are the only two books of the Gospels that have a genealogy at all. And one sees as an important that you have Abraham as the founder, because Abraham is the establisher of the Jewish religion. All right. Remember, it's through Abraham that men are circumcised. That is the covenantal bond between men and God in the Jewish faith. They still circumcise to this day. Okay. In Luke, that is not a concern at all, even though Jesus is circumcised on February 2nd, as is mentioned in the Gospel of Luke. He's not worried about the establishment of the church or the people of Israel with Abraham. He's worried about the establishment of humanity. And so his genealogy goes all the way back to Adam, because Christ is the second Adam. Okay. For Matthew, Jesus is the fulfillment of the messianic expectations that come from the children of Abraham. For Luke, Jesus is the second Adam. Okay. Having restored us to our relationship with God that Adam messed up. And so Adam is an important point of reference for Luke. Abraham is an important point of reference for Matthew. Now, which is right? Yes. Do you think the genealogies of the Old Testament are accurate? They're not. We have no idea. Because can you trust one source? I don't know, but no, they're not. I mean, just to make things really complicated, how is it possible that Cain, Seth, and whoever else had children?
You had to find other humans.
But there is no mention of those other humans in the Bible. So where are they?
In Nod.
In Nod. They're with Cain in the land where God is not. So a couple of points about this, and I've said this before. Do not use modern day historical critical assumptions to judge the Bible. It will fail every time. Okay, you cannot. It would be like taking a square peg and trying to put it in a round hole. It won't happen. We have people who say the Bible has to be true, like all true. I mean, someone again, not Orthodox, says the Bible is either all true or none of it's true. Where does it say that? And according to whom? That's the modern historical critical method. So these people who claim to be against the historical critical method because they want to be saying that the Bible is all true are using the very apparatus that their so-called enemies are using to either say the Bible is 100% true or just throw it all out. Well, that's silly. Okay, there's enough in the Bible that we can hold on to. We can hold on to the teachings of Isaiah. We can believe that there is aspects of what is told in the first 11 chapters of Genesis. Okay, did it all happen? I don't know. I got a phone call from somebody this week. So I have a question. What? Noah, did it happen or not? Quick. Well, maybe. There are two accounts of it. Okay, one is called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a Babylonian text, okay, which talks about a great flood that destroyed the whole world. And there's the one in Noah. Okay.
In Peru too.
Okay, well, there's also one in Peru then. All right. So you have 3 different accounts then of a flood that has destroyed the entire world. Now, we've talked in the past about how they perceived the world to exist in the time of Genesis. All right. And I wish I could draw you a picture, but I can't. Imagine a bubble. Okay. And on the outside of the bubble is water. On the inside of the bubble is dry land, with the exception of where there's water that's poked through. So when it's raining, what's happening? You've got holes in the upper part of the bubble called the firmament. Okay. And there are boundaries that keep the water from coming in and flooding the land. All right. And when God visited his wrath on those people in the time of Genesis, basically you have all these holes appearing in the bubble and flooding the whole world. Okay. So it's not like our globe, it's the reverse of that. Okay. It's literally the inside of a bubble. That's what's dry. Everything else is water. Okay. It's hard for us to conceptualize because we have spent our whole lives thinking of the big blue dot with oceans and land and a sun that goes like this, and we go around the sun and all of that. That's not how it was seen back then. Okay, so that's a long way around to say that when we get back to the genealogies, there's really no way to know. And let's look at that with a harder eye, okay? Albert said that from Abraham to David, things remain pretty consistent. And that's true. You know why? Because you have Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings.
But one thing Luke never mentioned, David's son, he said David's son Nathan. I never heard of Nathan.
No, you have, just not as his son.
Well, okay. I heard of Nathan.
God it was who gave David to
What?
Nathan the prophet.
All right.
So
well,
Luke
David
confuses.
David had a bunch of sons.
Yeah, he had a son named Absalom. He had a son named Solomon. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So Luke, and so I run the risk of causing apostasy here. But Nathan is the prophet that tells David that Solomon's brother is going to die, because David had that little tryst with Bathsheba before she had become a widow, and she got pregnant by him.
But Solomon was the only one from that.
No, because he died. Okay, so here's the story. Okay, so we'll talk about this again when we get back to to Samuel. But the story goes that David is out looking at his dominion and he sees Bathsheba bathing, and he lusts after her. So he goes and he has his way with her, and she gets impregnated by the experience. And it's discovered that she's pregnant. And so David then arranges to have her husband, who she's married at the time, come back and spend time with her so that it makes it look like his baby, not David's. Well, Uriah refuses to do this because he's an honorable man and because he does not want to desert his brothers while they're on the front. So David does the next best thing. He puts him on the front line and he dies. Okay, and then David marries Bathsheba. So everything's perfect, right? Well, along comes Nathan, the prophet, and says, so I've got a little story for you. This story goes like this. There is a man who has this gigantic vineyard, okay? And he has this vineyard and he's successful, and he has a neighbor who has this one little vine, but it's giving off the best grapes. And the owner of the big vineyard desires those grapes beyond anything that he himself has. And he tries to get it through legitimate means and he fails. So he overruns that place, kills the owner, and takes the vineyard for himself. Nathan looks at David and says, what should happen to that man? And David says, you should put that man to a miserable death. And Nathan says, you are that man. Okay. And David realizes this. And then Nathan says, because of what you have done, The child that is in Bathsheba at this time will die. And there is nothing that you can do that will change that. And so from that point on, David puts on sackcloth and sits in ashes and mourns for this child that has yet to be born. And lo and behold, the child dies. And David, upon hearing the news of the child dying, puts on his normal clothing and goes back to his daily life. And they ask him, why did you do this? And he said, because while the baby was still alive, there was still some hope that I could, through my penance, persuade God to be merciful. But now that his, actions have been done, there's nothing I can do. And then he knew Bathsheba again, and they gave birth to Solomon. Okay. So Nathan is the prophet who tells David that he's this horrible sinner. Now, a couple of other things about that, and we'll visit this again in the future. But David, at that time, we believe that he wrote Psalm 50. Have mercy on me, O God, according to thy great mercy, according to the abundance of thy mercy, blot out my iniquities. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquities and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my iniquities, my sin is ever before me. Against thee only have I sinned, and that which is evil in thy sight, that thou mayest be justified in thy sentence and prevail when thou art judged. And so on and so forth. This is the great psalm of repentance. I say it every time I do a divine liturgy. We say it a lot through the course of other things, the Compline service, among other things that we do. Okay, so we'll be doing it a lot next week. All right, so Nathan then is the prophet. Is he a son of David's? I don't know. Not that I've ever been aware of. Okay, but Luke didn't care. Luke knew who Nathan was. Okay, and so that's the connection. But those genealogies are just meant to show connectivity. The major point is that Jesus is the Messiah, the fulfillment of the Hebrew expectations, beyond their expectations, really. Okay, he is the Son of God. He is the second Adam. He is the fulfillment of the Abrahamic tradition. He's all of those things. And you only get that by merging the two together.
So
Okay.
one could look at the whole Old Testament.
Yep.
As a metaphor,
Yes.
as long as you got the right message.
What you see in the Old Testament, I mean, don't denigrate it. You can get a lot of good theology out of it.
Yes.
Okay. The Psalms.
Right.
I mean, even just right there. But the other thing that you get is what happens when you become obsessed with power.
Right.
What happens when you decide that you want a worldly king as opposed to having God as your king? What happens? Well, we get to find that out pretty soon because we're going to learn, and we're not going to be able to talk about it because we'll be in Lent.
And I remember reading years and years ago
Judges.
that there was not one piece of evidence that Moses was ever in Egypt.
Huh.
On no hieroglyphics, nothing. There was no mass exodus.
Okay.
Now, and that's okay by me. I mean, I'm all right with all. Because it's the message for me. And it
Okay.
always was.
Right.
But you battle, I mean, you know, people, many of us are literalists.
Okay. But that said, is there any, and see, I'm very uncomfortable with those kinds of statements.
All right.
Okay. And the reason for that is there any proof that all right, let's put it a different way. I need to be careful with this. I mean, we can look at our founding fathers, okay, and we can say that they existed because we have writing or something like that, okay? If all of your resources were pulled from Canada, would you have any evidence that John Adams existed?
Probably not,
No.
or very little.
That's close to analogous. It's not as analogous as I want it to be yet. I mean,
I do.
I think the problem is that we're trying to say what we're looking for is a Josephus. Do you know who Josephus is?
Yes.
Do you know who Josephus is? All right. Josephus is a Jewish historian who apparently wrote his stuff around the same time as Jesus Christ lived. So that is an outside source that says these things happened during the time when I was writing, and he wrote them all down. Now, is there real evidence that Jesus existed according to Josephus? Maybe. Maybe. It is certainly not the center focus of the book. Okay. He didn't write it because he wanted people to know about Jesus. I think he did say, or maybe someone added it later, that there was a man, Jesus, son of Joseph, who was condemned for a crime he didn't commit. And this is what happened. There was a tumult as a result. But he doesn't go into any elaboration about the temple curtain being split or anything like that. Okay. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for outside confirmation that things that are told about in the scriptures actually happened. We don't have that evidence. Okay. And let's be honest. I've talked about this before. Basil the Great, we know he died in 375. Do you know when John Chrysostom died? Nope. No one does. Do you know when Gregory of Nyssa died? Nope. No one does. You know when Gregory the Theologian died? Nope. No one does. Okay. And these are luminaries.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, well, somewhere around there, but we don't know when, because by the time they died, they were no one knew them. Okay, so how can we have a genealogy, okay, where we don't even know the existence of some of these people?
Well, you know they existed.
Some of them, not all of them.
Well, you may not know that. They didn't know their own birth dates.
Right. But
So
we did this.
Yeah.
Remember, I traced the whole genealogy of Matthew. You know, we did. We dealt with all those people. Remember, and some of them we just couldn't track down. So it's not meant to be a historical like that. It's meant to be a theological history, just like the first 11 chapters of Genesis. It's meant to be a theological history that sort of gets us into the framework of here we are and here's why we are. I mean, with the first 11 chapters of Genesis, it's here's how things were created and this is why we're in a mess. Okay. Now you've heard me say over and over again, according to Genesis, that human beings were vegetarians until Noah's boat crashed on the rocks on Mount Ararat. Okay, it's when they got off the boat that they were allowed to eat meat. Before that, they weren't allowed to. Okay, and before the fall, everything was vegetarian. Everything, lions, tigers, bears, snakes, vegetarians, all of them. Okay, well, there's a small little problem with that. We have fossils of Allosaurus dinosaurs with their teeth embedded in the backbone of Brontosauruses. Okay? Animals that lived way before any of this happened. All right? And they're eating meat. So what are we supposed to do with that?
Does it really matter?
It doesn't really matter. And that's kind of where I go with this, to be honest with you. It really doesn't matter because we don't know enough about either to be historically accurate. One is a matter of faith, and we believe that God is the creator of all. However that manifests itself, we really don't know, and we're not allowed to guess because it's not up to us. It's something that's presented to us in the book of Genesis. And if you think about it, Eden is really heaven. Okay? Eden is really heaven. It is a place where you walk with God. And they saw God all the time. He was with them in their presence, and they could see him, and it was good. And all the animals were at peace and not tearing at each other and devouring each other. That's heaven. Okay? There is no more violence in heaven. Violence is gone. Think about how awesome that is. Okay, so basically all we're doing is going back to the beginning, right? Okay, so the beginning is actually the ending, and the ending is actually the beginning. Now, did dinosaurs exist? Yes, but what I love is when the iguanodon, one of the dinosaurs, was first discovered. It's one of the very first dinosaurs that they found, okay? It had this sharp, spiky thing that they found in the fossil. So they put it on his snout. And they said, that's his snout. It was his thumb. They didn't know until they found 2 of them on a different fossil that actually was attached to his hands. So the iguanodon had these 2 spiky things that it would stab predators with to keep them from eating them. Okay. But when they first came up with it, they said, oh, that's got to be his nose. And for generations, they believed that dinosaurs were descendant from reptiles, right? Well, now they think birds, which really disappoints me because I like them better as lizards. And dinosaur means a terrible lizard. You know, so what are you going to call it? A dino bird? I don't know. Sounds weird. All right, so I'm digressing, but you get my point that we're in a position where we really don't even know. And let me make things even a little bit worse for us. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, we know these names, right? And we know their philosophies and all of that. Okay, we don't know them. We know little bits and pieces that have been left through the centuries that we can glean from and read. But we don't know the whole of what they taught. We don't know the whole of what they believed because we don't have all the texts. Just like with the Egyptians, there's no guarantee that everything that's existing right now is the sum and total of everything that Egyptians wrote. There could be accounts of Moses. We have no way to know. It's desert. Desert has a way of sandblasting things and making them go away. So we don't really know if there was a true Moses or not. So it's not up to us to make those determinations. The Bible says, yes, I'm not in a mood to disagree. You know?
As long as I can remember Charlton Heston. That's all.
You can remember your Charlton Heston. I'd rather him be Moses than holding a gun and saying, you know, out of my cold dead hands. So I'm fine with him as Moses. He can stay as Moses. Yul Brynner, you bet. The angel of death. I was never more scared of anything than watching that cloud go over this, you know, those tendrils coming over. Oh, terrifying. Yes. All right. What other questions do we have?
Well, getting back to what Albert said about Moses,
Yeah.
then where did the 10 Commandments come from if Moses didn't exist? I mean,
But he did exist for us, Courgette, for our purposes. He certainly did exist. What he's saying is that there's no sign of his existence in Egypt. And I don't care.
oh, okay, all right. So,
Yeah,
but
I don't
they're
care.
not-
There's no sign of my
okay,
existence in Lebanon either. Actually, there might
Right.
be, but I
Okay.
mean, there's no sign of my existence anywhere else.
Yeah.
You might have record of
Okay.
me in Lebanon, but probably not anywhere else. France, maybe. Canada. Disney World.
Where else is it getting? We're tracking.
Yeah, someone is. That's why I wear my tin hat. All right, so yeah, so I mean, again, we're trying to take history from our way of looking at history. We're photographic now. Oh, and just look at that can of worms this is about to open up, because now you can take photographs and doctor them perfectly. With artificial intelligence, you can make things real that never existed before. Okay, that's fun.
AI was a prophetic thing.
No, I hope not.
They destroyed AI back then. Maybe you ought to consider that.
Maybe we should destroy it. I don't know. Maybe. All right, other questions? Rhonda, do you have questions?
I
You
have
do?
a couple.
Okay, bring 'em.
Well, they say there are several places in the Bible that talk about the giants,
Yes.
and I was just curious. How literally do we take giants, and do we mean like just people, or like fairy tale style giants that you think of?
Wow. I think you finally got me. I don't have an answer for you. I can give you a couple of things. But Goliath was a giant. Okay. The head of the Philistines. And there may be something to that. I mean, that he was like considerably larger than everybody.
Mhm.
Okay. Because his sword itself was just so massive that most people couldn't even lift it, right? So there's something to be said for that. Obviously, that we had talked about this with Noah, that the flood was intended in part to wipe the giants off of the map. Because there's several different things. There are giants, there are sons of God who are intimate with daughters of men, okay, and have children by them, which are abominations. Okay. And then there's also the Nephilim. Now, a nephesh is something that has breath. Okay. It has become a Yiddish term to basically describe someone who's a little bit annoying. Okay, but they are the Nephilim and the giants and the sons of God are all references in Noah to people that did things that are abominable in God's sight.
That's,
Okay.
the Nephilim, I mean, as many words have various meanings.
Yep.
One was giants.
Yep.
But the other one was like fallen ones.
Yep.
They had done something, yeah.
Yep.
So they had to be destroyed.
Yep.
So maybe they were big fallen ones, who knows?
Maybe. Now, let me, there are two other, see, this is another thing about the Old Testament. It does borrow from outside sources. Okay. I mean, and this is another thing that sort of puts into dispute this whole issue of divine revelation and all of that. One of them is Leviathan. Okay. Now, Leviathan is something that we directly reference every Vespers because we have that psalm that we talk about the creation of the world in poetic form. And one of the things we say in the middle of that psalm is, there go the ships, and there goes that Leviathan that thou hast formed to sport therein. Okay, and we've talked about this before, but Leviathan then was the monster that would cause shipwrecks. Okay, because going on the sea was dangerous, but it was also very rewarding. If you were able to go from point A to point B, trade with those people, give them what you have, and they would give you what you want from them, and then come back, you're going to make a lot of money. So people would do it all the time. All right. But those that died on the sea would be called, well, victims of Leviathan. Okay. So there's that. Okay. Leviathan exists outside of the scriptures as a primordial sea monster that terrifies the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. Another is Lilith. Okay. Lilith, according to some ancient myths, is the actual first woman, not Eve. Not mentioned in the scriptures, but there are hints of it throughout the Bible. Okay. And there are definite hints of it in extra biblical things that existed at about the same time that, these other things are going on. But Lilith was seen as kind of a demon, horrible woman, person, but just not, So it's yeah, it's an interesting thing. And that's why, if you're like a child of the 90s, the Lilith Fair, that's where that came from. The concert series. Okay. There was another thing I was going to bring up there. I should write these things down. So Lilith and Leviathan. No, that's probably enough. But so you can see how these tales sort of find their way in to the scriptures and are adapted. Okay. Leviathan. Oh, I know what it was. If you look at we've talked about this too, but if you look at the icon of our Lord's baptism, Theophany, okay, Jesus is standing on the River Jordan with this couple of doors that are under his feet, which are symbolic of the doors that he busts down in Hades, okay? But in the front of the icon, there are two little figures. One's riding what looks like maybe a seahorse, and the other's got a vessel in his arms, okay? The one with the vessel in his arms is pouring it out. That is the personification of the River Jordan, It actually says that on the icon. Okay. But the other one is a primordial sea goddess. I can't remember the name. It's like Thasus or Thalassus. Okay. And that, again, predates the stories, but it is certainly something that if you were Greek and knew your early Greek mythology, you would know exactly who this person is. And the reference is meant to say that Christ comes and tames the waters. He makes the waters that used to be fearful and dangerous and subjugates them. Okay. And that's why the doors are there. Okay. Because Jesus subjugates Hades in the icon of the resurrection of his time in Hades. Okay. Where the doors are over the abyss. Okay. The doors are over the water to show that he blesses by his presence. He hallows the waters and he tames them. He controls this ancient sea goddess. Okay. You never hear that in the scriptures, but it's these kinds of things that come into play as we understand, what it is that Jesus is doing. And that is another sign that shows that we're not just inheritors of the Old Testament, but we're inheritors of old Greek mythology too.
What's the time frame, like, when we think of Zeus and, Aphrodite and the rest of them?
Right.
Like, time-wise, where does that fit with Old Testament and New Testament? I don't really have a good concept of that.
Well, one of the things about Greek mythology, and this is a little bit complicated, so I
Mhm.
apologize in advance. There are Greek philosophers and there's Greek mythology. And those two things run hand in hand. So you've got Plato and Socrates, Aristotle, and people like that sort of doing their thing. And at the same time, you have Zeus and Ares and Aphrodite and Hermes and all those figures. So the Greek gods are fatally flawed human personalities in the form of super powerful beings. Okay. Each one represents an aspect of human failings. Okay. I mean, that's how I would put it. Hera is the bitterly jealous, angry, tired mother. Aphrodite is the extremely beautiful, but horribly vain and malicious epitome of beauty. Apollo is probably one of the best of them all, but even he is insufferably jealous. Zeus is, the worst of the worst, killer of his own father. He's a typical male, having children with whoever he wants to have children with, and all that. So every single one of them has this weird kind of flaw. So by the time you get to, I would say, the prophecy of Daniel, all of that's in play. Okay. All of that has been in some form of existence because at the time, the people of Israel are dealing with Macedonians. And by the time you get to the Macedonians, you've got Greek mythology. Okay. Then the Romans come some centuries later because Greek declines and Rome increases. And basically all Rome does is adopts all the old Greek gods, gives them new names, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and so on, and then just goes off and does the same thing. But in their case, their emperor is also given godlike qualities. Okay, so their emperors are seen as almost at the same level as Jupiter and Mars and all the rest, which is, really awkward when you get stabbed in the back and die. So, yeah. But it's about the same time. Okay. And more interesting to me, well, I mean, it's all interesting, but as Orthodox thought increases, like by the time it becomes a legal faith within the Roman Empire, which is in the 4th century, so it takes a while. And there's actually another Greek philosopher that is sort of standing side by side with them. As they're increasing, so is he, Plotinus. Okay, I always thought Plotinus was older, but Plotinus is a contemporary of Basil the Great and Gregor the Theologian. Okay, And so a lot of the theology that they talk about, one nature, three persons, the way that the world is formed and all that, a lot of that's based on Platonian, well, they call it Neoplatonist, but it's Plotinus's writings that they are heavily indebted on for their grammar, for their language to describe the nature of God. It's very interesting.
Mhm.
And I thought that had been, put into the history books, but nope. They still existed side by side. And along those lines, fun fact, what were Christians persecuted for?
Cannibalism.
That's one. Cannibalism, right? Because take, eat, this is my body, drink, eat all this is my blood.
And just putting up with all the abuse.
Nope. There was, yes, but there was another thing.
Not worshiping them.
Yeah,
Kind of, sort of, but what's really that?
they didn't bow down to the pagan gods.
Okay, that's how we extrapolate that, yes, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'll tell you when someone tells me. You're in a country where your loyalty to the emperor is essential, and you don't go to the public sacrifices. What does that mean? That you don't care about the country, right? What does it make you? It makes you a traitor. Yeah, they were put to death for treason. Cannibalism and treason. Those are the major reasons why they were persecuted. Yep. And so Christians had to bend over backwards to say, oh, no. We do care. We were loyal to the emperor, and they were for the most part, except for military conscription, because they had to serve, they worshiped Mars and all the, gods of war. But they made their own prayers. I mean, think about what I do in the Divine Liturgy. I pray for the Metropolitan, right? And then immediately after the Metropolitan, it's this country, its president, and all civil authorities, right? So it's not like we don't care. We're just not doing it publicly with everyone else. Okay. So they were accused of treason. Other questions? What you got? One more.
I have another one.
Okay.
So I can't see why I got this isn't here. My arm's not long
Mm.
enough. So this was in Mark, and it was shortly before Jesus died. It said that there was a young man followed him and left the linen cloth and
Yes.
slept naked.
Yes.
And I read in the footnotes that it said that the point of this was that it would be great shame and humiliation.
Okay.
And then there was some dispute as to who this young man would have been.
Right.
But I guess my question is, why was this person, whomever he was, shamed? Like, I didn't get the impression that he personally did something wrong to be shameful that Jesus was dying. So I was just curious. And I had not heard that before, so I had not read that account previously.
Okay. So this is pretty awesome. I like this question. Thank you. So if you look at all four accounts of the arrest, this is the only one that makes mention of the person being grabbed at, leaving his tunic behind, and running home naked. It's the only account. There's no other account. Matthew, Luke, John does not even bring up this event happening. Okay. Popular tradition would say that's Mark. Okay. And that's why it was in the account, because he was an eyewitness to the arrest. And the reason why he brings it up is because he's embarrassed, because like so many of the other disciples, he runs away and does not stay with Jesus as he endures all these things.
Mhm.
I mean, think about it. Peter went just barely. In the Gospel of John, it says that John went, but that's because John had a connection, a political connection to the people that were trying Jesus. Remember, well, no, wrong side of the family. Okay, but yes, there was a connection between John and members of the court. Okay, and John didn't care. He loved Jesus. He makes it very clear he'd be willing to go with him if he had to. Peter loved Jesus too, but chickened out, before the cock crowed twice. Okay. Everyone else went into hiding except the women. The myrrh bearer stayed, his mother stayed, people like that stayed, but the men were gone. Okay. And Mark is one of those men. He
Mhm.
ran away. So that's, that leads to the popular understanding because Mark describes as a young man is grabbed, right? And so it's understood that it's him and that he was a young man. And so it's also understood that Peter dictated the majority of the Gospel of Mark to Mark. And so it's really Peter's gospel seen through the writing of Mark. It's also understood that that's probably the oldest of the four Gospels. Okay. The order of the writing would be Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John.
Why do you suppose they didn't put them in that order in the Bible?
That I couldn't tell you. I would guess just because Matthew is so saturated with prophetic fulfillment. And it really does have to do with the concern being that it's Jesus is the Messiah, is the fulfillment of every prophetic expectation there is in the Old Testament. So it's the continuity. You've got the Old Testament setting the framework of the need of a Messiah, and then you have it answered in the Gospel of St. Matthew.
Mhm.
That would be my guess.
Mhm.
Why Mark second? Couldn't tell you, but probably the same kind of thing. The Gospel of Mark is action after action after action after action. There's very little downtime in the Gospel of St. Mark. The Gospel of St. Luke is the Gentiles' gospel. Okay, so Matthew is the Jews, Luke is the Gentiles. Another reason why he doesn't really care about stopping at Abraham. He's going to go all the way to Adam because Luke is really just more concerned about addressing who is Jesus Christ to everybody, not just Jews, but Gentiles as well. And John is the theological gospel. It ends with the beginning, like I've been saying, but the Protestants say that the Gospel of John is a birth, a Christmas gospel. No, that's not right. It's a Pascha gospel. It's the Paschal gospel, which is why we read the Gospel of John to begin our Divine Liturgy for Pascha. So, so Mark, it's understood that that's Mark running away. I'm surprised they don't have that in their footnotes, to be honest with you.
Allude to that, but it also talked about a couple other possibilities.
Okay. Yeah. Another, there is a reference elsewhere where Jesus has a child sit on his lap. That's not in the Gospel of Mark, it's somewhere else. But they believe that's Ignatius of Antioch. Okay. That the young child, and so Jesus left such an impression on him that he was consecrated to Christ immediately following that and lived his entire life dedicated to Christ, and in fact willingly accepted martyrdom for Christ.
Mhm.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions, anybody? So for housekeeping, I think for right now, we're going to have pre-sanctified divine liturgies for the next 6 weeks, and then we're going to have unction in the week after. And then I'm probably going to take a day the week after that. So we'll resume this in May, unless you like it so much that you want to pick it up on some other day, but we'll have to figure that out. I don't really think there's a day that I could do it. Certainly not next week, because we'll be busy doing all services. If you have any thoughts or anyone make any comments or anything like that, just let me know and we'll deal with it. But I'm really grateful for the time that we're spending together. Keep reading that Bible, okay? Write down the questions. And in fact, one thing that I can do is if you write the questions down and send them to me, then I'll just do like an occasional video, okay, that answers some of those questions, all right, to keep it going, okay? That's for everybody, all right? So God bless you. Thank you very much. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome.
Thank
Take care. Bye-bye.